static and stain. Thanks for tuning in and finding the frequency. I'm your host, M. Dion Ward, and every week we dig into the moments that stick, the glitches, the ghosts, and the beautiful mess in between. Today's story is The False General, Part 1. Listener discretion is advised. That false general, the hedonist poltroon, wearing his knife in his boot, but his courage is on loan. He constructs a path needled with lies that will prick the blood from your freedom to see you left with a vacant happiness. Oh, if he married his visions to a truthful course, he would find himself at the smoking end of his own pistol. A yellow bastard like his dad before him. I knew enough to understand. He was a miracle of providence, luck like the devil, and in his stony amber eyes he prepared false victories to relay to any who would listen. And they did listen to the fancy parakeet sing his tales, his feathers yellow as sunflower, waiting to be petted like a good little birdie. Confidence tricks were his prized possessions, so he had rehearsed them all, collected in polished cards kept in a close deck to be spent at his leisure. He would follow you down a path of roses, smiling all the while, knife you in the back, and step over your corpse. I tired of his drivel, as this keen fool stalked the less fortunate, making them find their way as mocked beings, seeing him laugh from the darkness where he knelt, scooping his fortune. And I was there the night he found his doom, the night I saw him swallowed whole by the very madness that fueled him. But that is not the night of which I recall to you now. General Lyon rounded a corner, and I, stepping out from behind his black Cadillac, followed slowly. I had waited a mere stone's throw from his house, in the shadowed alley of an adjacent townhome, still and calm, hoping to be unseen. The darkness was stark here, due to a broken streetlight, so it was as much a problem for me as it was for him, I am sure. Therefore, I was draped in all black, coat and sneakers and socks and trousers fitted for the pitch. When he arrived, I watched him fumble for his key fob and lock his car, which was confirmed with the resounding honk of the car's horn. Quickly, I slipped from the alley to the back of his car and waited, crouched, until he was a safe distance. I proceeded after him. The air was cold, and I filled my lungs with it, carrying courage as well as my feet. In the pocket of my pea coat, I felt for my weapon, a short pocket knife that folded uneasily as for safety reasons. I clicked it and flipped it open by memory and folded it in again. This I did over and over as I walked, making sure there could be no mistake, no hesitation. See, I am no murderer, but I can no longer allow this charlatan to remain alive in his coldness. His heart is of ice, and he is a keeper of lies. I hate him to my very soul. For years, I had worked with him, performing accounting duties at his actuarial firm, Lyon and Lyon, seeing him sow his disasters on unsuspecting folk, but none like his ilk. He preyed upon the poor, as many rich men must to remain rich. His father, a detestable slumlord known for his disdain for children and women, tossed people out onto the street without a blink if they were even one day past due. The same cold heart seemed to beat within the chest of his son, and I reckon it symptomatic of his genetic pool. I sat by at my desk and crunched his numbers thoroughly, so till I knew that he had been embezzling. The numbers would always come up wrong, far beyond the mark. Then he would bring some receipt, as if by magic, to balance the lost sum. And who was I to point this out to the man who signed my paycheck? However, fate would force him to play this game with one of my family members, my dear Aunt Karen, which unfortunately resulted in her death. Aunt Karen had taken to an impenetrable strangeness beforehand, no doubt contributed to by the dealings of my evil employer. When I would visit, I would often catch her staring into nothing, prostrated before some haphazard shrine erected from various heirlooms, ancient trinkets, and dusty-smelling books. She prayed unintelligible things, mumbles and curses, which I assumed a ritual of her Polish ancestry. Letters and bills were strewn before her. On one such occasion, she yowled like a banshee in front of that motley hearth. Clutching the foreclosure letter in her feeble hands, she shook it vigorously, yelling, "Lyon!" over and over until she fainted from the strain. Luckily, I was there to catch her. Lyon and Lyon were contracted by the bank that owned her home to assess purchase risk, value, and the like. She had already taken out the second mortgage, yet had fallen behind in payments due to illness and frailty. The home itself was worth much more than General confessed to the bank, yet he told my dear aunt that the market was floundering, that she was lucky to get even a fraction of the sum he was offering, and she, deciding not to take it, not in her right mind, did not pursue the correct legal recourse to ameliorate this action. In short, the bank foreclosed and he hastened to purchase it, effectively stealing her home like the robber baron he was. This was too much to ignore. This made me complicit, and my heart shook from the strain. She was not General's sole victim, I can assure you. In my efforts to illuminate the dubious intentions of my employer, I gathered that he had wounded many by way of paltry dealings, foreclosure schemes, tenant evictions, and even auto acquisitions. All fell under his thumb, his darkened imprint striking through, his taint catching like fire. Young Susan Messer, recently diagnosed with lung cancer, was in the midst of applying for a loan to retrieve her home from the cycle of foreclosure. How quaint, that delusion, as she was set upon by the uncharitable Lyon. No, the irony of the name does not escape me in this instance. He ate her dream and set her adrift with mere haypennies for her home. I discovered that she nearly died last week, saved only by some unknown donor. So, I devised a plan, a murderous plot in my mind each day. Each day, I would rehearse the idea, and each day it was easier to rationalize. I was empowered by the easiness of the approach. The day came when I actually began following him home. He would usually leave the office last, and this gave me time to wait for him. Several weeks passed, and I began to understand his schedule. Mondays after work, he went home and watched SportsCenter until he slept. Tuesday night was a training session at the gym. He was usually home at 8 p.m. Wednesday, he visited a local pub where he stayed and flirted with the blonde bartender until past 10 p.m., whereas he decided to leave for home. Thursday night, he was gym-bound again. Friday, he went into Chicago with some of our colleagues for the weekly get-together. This I would attend as well, taking note of bravado and crass manner, which, in the end, made me pity him. He would likely die alone. Yes, He was a man of routine and quite predictable. 4 weeks of this predictability led me to decide to stab him to death. I would gut him in his own home. It was not uncommon for residents to be walking out this late, so as brazen as this seems, General should not be suspicious. The rows of townhomes in this neighborhood were in sets of 5, and there were 4 sets on each side of his street. His place was in the middle. They were brick buildings and set up in a pattern where every other domicile looked the same. So, as I thought, to break from monotony. General was also the owner of his set of buildings. Keeping with the theme, he was also a terrible landlord. He always spoke about how good he was to his tenants, but at least 2 of them had taken him to court in the last year over security deposits. Seems that after they would vacate, he would go back into the premises and fabricate damages such as a hole in the wall or some stained carpet. This was all he needed to keep their deposit. And since it was just his word against theirs, he won the cases. What a dick. I kept my pace even with his, fingering the blade in my front coat pocket as I moved. It was a good solid weight and felt at home within my grip. I had surmised to use an overhand grip with prison form, shank precision. An ice pick would have been a good choice, except it was not compact and would not be easily hidden on my person. A smile crept to my face at the thought of it. 6 quick stabs to the kidney area, maybe more. Just wanted to make sure that his hopes would be lost this night. He would leak his life liquids like water through a sieve, and surely it would be all over me. Another good reason to wear black. My smile faded now, as I could hear the miserly bastard whistling the sign by Ace of Base. He had taken to that bit as of late. I turned my nose up at it, smirking all the while and thinking he had a surplus of gall to be so happy. Across the street, a cat meowed, and a gust of cool wind pushed at my back. Was this my cue? General had reached the low, wrought iron gate in front of his townhome, readying to unlatch the fence. Once he has gone through, the spring-loaded gate will close quickly. There must be just enough distance that I can get a decent running start to speed vault over. The timing must be impeccable. I will need to land soundly and rush him just as he opens the door. At that point, I can grab and cover his mouth, stab him, then push him through the threshold without causing a ruckus. Through the gate he went. He had not noticed me. He was still whistling and started fumbling for his door key. The gate swung back with a resounding click. Soon, I would have him. So soon. Justice would find its path. Almost ready. Patience. General popped up the 5-step stair and pulled open the storm door. There was a click and a soft squeal from the metal hinges. Closer I came. There was an itch in my eye, momentarily dogging my vision. I blinked it away stubbornly. My madness will make way tonight, undeterred. His key was out, and he placed it in the keyhole. The air felt hot around my head. My eyes seemed to flood crimson. I breathed in deep. Now, adrenaline surged, and my heart was a fist in my throat as I broke into a brisk run. I planted my left hand on the wrought iron fence and, using my momentum, vaulted sideways, which carried me up and over. As I landed, he had already opened the door. 4 quick strides, and I was at the steps. His head turned mid-whistle as he heard me closing in. There was no shock on his face. Ironically, this surprised me. I waved it aside, a question to be answered later. The knife was out in my right hand, and I threw my left arm around his throat. We almost tumbled through before I yanked sharply backward, pulling us erect. The stabbing commenced. He jerked madly as I jabbed the knife in his lower back. They were deep, vicious, ragged gouges that offered compound damage due to the struggle. Each strike was aimed for his kidney, ensuring death in a matter of minutes. His arms flailed backward, gloved hands brushing and pushing at my face. I pulled against his throat again as he reached toward my eyes. He let out a gasp and pulled at my arm to ease the choking. I drove the blade deeper still one last time, and I noticed the fight leave him, his spirit ebbing. Even with the gloves on, I felt the warmth of his life oozing out, and I almost lost my grip on the knife handle. I cuffed his mouth before he could muster a sufficient wail, and the moans of a muzzled dog escaped my grasp. He crumpled under the strain like stilettos on an obese woman. Behind me, the pneumatic-aided storm door closed with a restrained click. He dropped to his knees and slumped to the side, head thumping against his floor. I almost fell with him as I staggered, slipping on the blood that had spilled. I stood up straight, sucking wind, and I heard my heartbeat inside my head. Then I heard him. His breathing came in withered, strained gasps and intermittent groans. With the adrenaline coursing through his veins and elevated heart rate, General was likely to exsanguinate ahead of schedule. I blinked out of my frenzy and found that I was breathing wildly as hell. My chest was ablaze as my heart hastily pumped to keep up with the physical demand. Wearily, I stepped around to see my victim, dramatically frozen in the cold ambiance of the streetlight pouring through the open door. The storm door was full glass with an aluminum frame. I was not thankful, for I'm sure I could be seen from the street by any passers-by. General was still gasping, wanting to mouth words, but all he got out were wheezes and harried puffs like that of an athlete who has just finished the most maddening sprint of his life. Blank eyes stared up at me, pitiful blue orbs now unrecognizable in the shadows, and his face twisted away from the light. Wisps of his brown hair glistened where the light hit the wet strands, and a bit of perspiration appeared at his neck. I shook my head and stepped over him to shut the door. It was remarkably heavy, which was slightly unnerving due to the ease with which it was opened. I pushed hard. It felt like I was pushing a car, so I leaned into it with my shoulder, and it took at least 10 seconds before it closed. There was an audible boom, then a series of rattles and clicks and switches that reminded me of a bank vault. A chill ran through me, and goosebumps rose like a tide across my skin. My mind again begged me to question, how in the hell did he open the door so easily? The darkness, so eerily pitch and quiet, my mind was stolen to frightening images, and I frantically searched for my cell, as if I had forgotten where I put it. Finding it, I pulled it from my pocket thumbed the button to wake it, then flicked upwards on the screen to find the flashlight app. It flared against the door as I raised it, and I was puzzled immediately. The door was different. They're all supposed to look the same. They all do, at least from the outside. But here, inside General's home, the door looked like some medieval throwback. It was solid wood, reinforced with metal at the corners and across the middle. Where the doorknob should have been, there was now an antique pull ring. It was ancient, decrepit, and covered in verdigris. I touched it, feeling along the emerald crust. It was brass, I was sure of it, sturdy and heavy. Just beneath it was a large keyhole, same metal, just as worn and old. I couldn't understand what I was seeing, and I felt there was a puzzle piece missing. I must have made a terrible miscalculation, or I was going mad. Either way, the hair on my neck stiffened like it was under arrest. Agreed with my assessment. I shivered as the chill enveloped me. I'm hit with the shockwave of regret and horror as I realized I might be trapped. I grasped the ring handle and tugged at it with my free hand. The door moaned like old wooden steps, but didn't budge one iota. I maneuvered the phone in one hand to grasp the ring firmly with both, and the light flicks around like a mad theater attendant all the while. Suddenly, the light hits a spot on the wall, and there is a face? I nearly dropped my phone then. God. I jerk at the ring knob with both hands like a madman. The light from the phone flashes against my coat and towards the left, so I can see the blood stain shine against it momentarily. The air of the room stirs with my grunts of frustration and the creaks and groans of the door handle. It's futile, this struggle. The fucker would not budge. "Oh God, oh God," I exclaimed. My voice was loud and full of terror. I heard it. I recognized it. In my head, it sounded crazy. Crazy! I started to sweat beneath my cap as the frustration built upon my anxiety. I let go of the pull ring and turned my phone light on the general. "You motherfucker!" I screamed at the corpse. "You fucking bastard. You had one last trick, huh? God damn it, you son of a bitch. How the fuck do I get out of here?" General lay still, eyes frozen in time. Wild blue pools now glazed over like ice. He was sprawled like roadkill against the floor? Concrete? I thought to myself, what is this? Blood pooled at my feet, but where there should have been a linoleum, there was hard stone. A stone floor. In my head, my sanity wavered as I questioned myself. Where did it come from? Why? This is too much. I'm ill prepared. I miscalculated. I could have sworn too much. Something is wrong. Just as I was about to look for lighting, I glimpsed something in General's hand. He held it tightly in his fist as his knuckles appeared white compared to the rest of his body. His face looked as if he would laugh. It is a visage stoked and steeped in the horror of the day, an agonized relief from torment. Careful not to touch the blood that was gathered there, I knelt next to his body, hoping that it is the key he clutched in his hand. Unfortunately, my wish to not touch his vile blood would not be granted, but at least I have on gloves. Afterwards, I will make sure to burn every wretched garment, every stitch of clothing that I've worn. I have no aspirations of finding myself in court, posturing about gloves and how they don't fit. A golden chain seemed to trail from the item he held close. I grasped at his fist with my free hand, trying to pull the object free by inserting my index and middle finger into the crease, and I attempted to pry it from his grip. This, however, became complicated by the slick sheen of blood covering the inside of his palm, and any leverage was quickly lost. "Oh, holy shit!" Words came out in an exasperated huff, as I cannot contend with the mounting misfortune this deed has wrought. I think to myself, he fucking deserved it, no matter what happens. I also think that, as an addition to the pool of bad luck, I must set the phone down and use both hands to pull the object free. Best thing would be to prop it against the door behind me and point the light towards the General's corpse. That also meant I needed to move to the opposite end as to not block the light. I did just that. However, as I turned back to the body, I noticed that the light did not penetrate the darkness. I mean, it was bright as morning itself, but the light does not go as far as it should. It sort of stopped, almost abruptly, a few feet ahead of where General lay. It seemed impossible, like the light was being swallowed, absorbed, sucked out of the room. I suppose it was a trick of the eyes, some madness in my head brought on by this horrible act. I was not thinking straight, I surmised. There was a warmth in the air, a sudden gust, followed by a foul odor. It was a rotten stench like that of a long dead animal, and I covered my mouth in disgust. The sense of urgency rose, but I tried not to panic. I walked around his body and genuflected, placing both hands firmly on his own to work the fingers loose from the object. Just as his fingers came apart, I heard the sound of a great exhalation or a groaning, and it tore into my gut. It was the sound of a sigh or a hush, a heavy wind that rolled in the room. It could have been many a thing, but it pushed a fright into my being, and I trembled like a newborn fawn. My instinct was to turn towards the sound, but I did not. I could not. I was frozen there, my hands clutching at General's lifeless paw. My eyes were dancing, darting from each of their corners. I heard the lurching, agonizing breath once again, but was accompanied by flickers of light. I found the courage to turn around then, and what I witnessed was a miracle. It should not have been. The image of an immense stone archway seeped through the darkness. It was at least 3 stories high, and deep in the recesses were lights or torches, from what I could tell, lit with a blue flame. 2 by 2 they ignited, advancing and illuminating either side of the tunnel. Each time they were lit, there was a whooshing sound, and I failed to count them. They were numerous, and I was too stricken with fear to care. I felt dizzy, and my head ached as I dared to look upon this nightmare. Was I being invited within? I had to get out. I had come and done the hateful deed, but I feared it would be my end as well. Still, as I thought on it, I must resign my life as I have taken one. How many more victims would he have if I was not there to unmake what God had wrought? The transmission fades, but the image remains. Thanks for sitting in the noise with me. Keep your eyes on the glitches. That's where the truth leaks through. I'm gone till the next break in the signal. This is Static and Stain.